Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bounce Back podcast by Robert. I'm your host, Robert Onyari Ebungoye, PhD, consultant, expert, and scholar in issues to do with policy, development, governance, and strategy. And today on this program, on this episode, we would like to talk about a very popular topic in Kenya right now that is being spoken about or talked about by the leadership in the country. And this is the issue on Singapore. Is the Singapore story an illusion for Kenya? Or is it based on fact, figure, and evidence-based research? So today I would like to ask a very important question. Can Kenya truly become the Singapore, or is this Singapore issue an illusion? So we will first of all, or we'll get right into it with the historical perspectives of how Singapore vis-a-vis Kenya debate came into be. And in 1960, Kenya and Singapore were at par economically. Singapore had broken away from Malaysia, and in 1965 it became independent. Remember, our country also achieved independence in 1963. We also share colonial masters. Singapore was colonized by the British, so were we. And in 1965, our GDP was higher than that of Singapore. If you look at the figures, the GDP per capita of Kenya at independence was USD 517, while that of Singapore was 109 US dollars. Remember, GDP is basically the value of goods and services produced within a country divided by its population. So it is the wealth of a country, generated wealth of a country divided by the population of its people. But then someone will beg the question, where did Singapore leave us? Many politicians in this country, current, retired, and even late, have been talking about Singapore and the Asian tigers like Malaysia, Singapore itself, Thailand, even Japan. They've been telling us how at independence, these countries were at par with Kenya economically. At independence, that some of these countries were even lower than us economically. In fact, Singapore has been said to have been a marshy swamp at the time of its independence in 1965. It was a country that was reeking in poverty. It was a country that could not feed itself. And being an island that produces virtually no natural resources, Singapore did not have an iota of economic development or economic future. So what indeed happened? That is what we want to interrogate today. And we will go to do a comparison between the steps that Singapore did vis-a-vis what we feel that we should do to start talking about getting to Singapore. I am not saying that we will not be able to. I am not saying that we cannot make it. But this podcast wants to interrogate the facts, the figures, so that you, the viewer, can make an informed opinion when you listen to politicians talking about Singapore, where you can be able to make an opinion whether it is an illusion, whether it is a dream, whether it's an hallucination, or if it is fact founded in evidence-based research. Thank you very much. So Singapore economically, where is it? And why are we talking about Singapore? And why do we aspire to become like Singapore? I have done comprehensive research on this issue. It's a policy issue, Singapore, as it is, the economics of Singapore. And this is what I concluded and I came by. That the financial sector in Singapore accounts for 13.5% of its GDP, of the country's GDP. That means that Singapore has 3.6 trillion USD in assets. It is the fourth global financial center by index, competing only with New York, London, and Hong Kong. The Singaporean National Exchange is among the top 10 in the world. It competes with the New York Stock Exchange, the London Stock Exchange, and also the Hong Kong Bourse. It has a central provident fund where every citizen is required to save 20% of their wages, their income, every month. It is not a tax, it is a saving. Also, Singapore boasts of good governance and a zero tolerance policy to corruption. A zero tolerance policy to corruption that works. Today in Singapore, if you are found committing acts of corruption, then the sentence is capital punishment, which is death. So, what is this Singapore all about? Singapore is also the second best country in the ease of doing business. Today, if you are to go to Singapore, you will onboard your company in the morning, register it by lunchtime, have tax documents in the evening, and by 5 p.m., the close of business, you will be ready to undertake your business come the next morning. It is also a 24-hour economy, and it is a robust, postmodern metropolis and great city. Manufacturing accounts for 20% contributor to the GDP of Singapore, with semiconductor business export rivaling Taiwan. Remember, Taiwan is the global and largest exporter and producer of semiconductor, which is a very, very crucial component in manufacture of technology products like phones, like games, and even our vehicles, sensors, that is. So because of ease of doing business, and being that it's a global hub for financial business, Singapore finds itself as the world's third largest recipient of FDI. FDI is foreign direct investment, which accounts for $105 billion worth of FDI investment in Singapore. FDI, remember, is not PPP. It is not aid. It is not a loan. It is not a grant. FDI means foreign direct investments, which are the investments or the equity investments that are invested by multinational corporations in Singapore or in any other country. Therefore, they have leveraged on inviting others. Because of the ease of doing business, it becomes very easy to do business in Singapore, and that is why their FDI is off the charts. Singapore, as it is today, posts an economic surplus each year. It has very little debt, and it can comfortably pay her socioeconomic debts. That means there is no child in Singapore who pays school fees. There's no patient in Singapore who pays a hospital bill. The government is well equipped to take care of its citizens and can be able to manage the bills of running that nation. In addition, Singapore has a very, very robust public housing program, affordable housing program, where there's a savings scheme for individuals to buy into government housing and to own homes. Indeed, 80% of the population of Singapore, which is 6 million citizens, raw people, live in government or public housing. Remember, this is a country which is an island nation, a country that does not export any natural resources. It does not experience mining, and it does not boast of anything that exports from its own as a country, as it were. It is not rich in natural resources, and it's a country that is purely reliant on the economies of other countries. Once again, this is the Bounce Back podcast by Robert. My name is Robert Onyari, expert consultant in issues of policy, development, and governance. On every Thursday, we have a segment called White Paper Series, where we interrogate, just like we are interrogating the podcast right now, we interrogate issues using pen and paper, where we write papers called white papers that we circulate for you to read and understand the issues like this Singapore and other issues that affect our nation, our continent, and indeed our world. Let us go on. What other things or aspects make Singapore this hub, this place, this paradise that everybody is talking about that they want to achieve? By the end of this podcast, you will learn and you will know and you'll be able to determine whether it is wishful thinking, it is hallucinating, or magic, or indeed it is evidence-based thinking. Singapore is a regional hub in Asia. Why? It has the second largest port in Asia after the Chinese ports. It is a hub for the inland container depot in a system called transshipment. In Singapore, goods come from other places, they dock in Singapore, and for the market around Asia, it is from Singapore that these goods are transshipped in a very vibrant system. It is fast in that investment. Also, the Singaporean airports are the best connecting hubs from other places in the world to Asia, the Pacific, Oceania, New Zealand, and Australia. Indeed, Singapore has a very, very robust infrastructure and postmodern infrastructure system where goods and motor and human transport, motorized transport, shipping, and air travel is very, very easy. Petroleum export. Singapore has the second largest petroleum refinery in that region and the fourth largest in the world. That makes it leverage very, very strongly in the export of refined petroleum goods and products. Remember one thing, Singapore does not mine oil. Singapore does not drill for oil. Singapore does not have its own oil, but it has created a postmodern, robust, and efficient petroleum refinery system where shipping for oil and crude oil docks in Singapore, it is refined, and the finished product is able to be exported in the area around. That makes you see how strong investment is, how business is in Singapore, and whether Kenya can be able to leverage with Singapore. So how does Singapore use her riches, her resources, her savings, her money? Singapore has two sovereign wealth funds. What is a sovereign wealth fund? A sovereign wealth fund is a fund which is a state-owned investment that is funded and managed by a government, and it is a fund that manages the surplus, the profit that comes out of a nation's GDP. For example, if you have oil, if you are mining oil, or if you have gold, if you have minerals, when we export these minerals, when we export this oil, the money we get out of it, and we use it to run our economy, the surplus, the profit, what remains on top is what is put in a national sovereign wealth management fund. Indeed, this surplus, which accounts for up to 50% of the Singaporean economy, is well managed, and it is the one that is able to absorb the shock of the Singaporean socioeconomic bills or economy. So there is zero corruption in that fund. It has two of them, and these are the funds that help run that economy. So how has Singapore built its economy? The facts and the figures that I've alluded to or I've just explained call or show us that Singapore is a well-oiled economic system. It is a gigantic financial hub. It is a regional hub for shipping. It is a regional hub for oil refinery. It is a regional hub for financial services. It is a regional hub for foreign direct investment. And in Singapore, it is the systems that work. It is the law that works. Zero corruption. Legal and regulatory strength leverages on strict adherence to the rule of law. Like I've said earlier, if you're found with corruption in Singapore, the sentence is capital punishment. And that is basically the sentence that some of these Asian tigers will impose on you. In China, it is the same. In Thailand, it's the same. Even in Vietnam, it is the same. Singapore boasts of one of the global best skilled workforce. They have invested in STEM courses. Remember, STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics courses. This helped this country to be able to have manpower, skilled manpower, to be able to run and to work in that economy. Keeping in mind, therefore, that 88% of Singaporeans are educated. 88% of the Singapore population, which is about 6 million, have gone to school and are well educated. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, this is the Bounce Back podcast by Robert, where we interrogate the issues, where we talk about the facts, the figures, and we look at matters making headlines around the world. On Thursdays, we post our white paper series, which is a pen to paper like articles or papers that inform you about the issues that are affecting our country. This is a podcast, and the white papers are papers. They come out on every Thursday, and we are going to share the links when we finish this program. So we want to shift focus and shift gears to Kenya, and we want to ask a question. Why can't Kenya match Singapore? Or if it can, how? All right? First of all, our GDP per capita in this country is USD $2,132 compared to Singapore's 90,674 USD. The problem with our country is that we have a high domestic and external borrowing balance sheet. We are not able to fund our budget. Already we are 11.4 trillion shillings in debt. We do not have savings, and we have few foreign exchange reserves. Nairobi is a regional hub, yes, but hardly. Our ease of doing business is not good enough. Attracting foreign direct investment is not good enough. And we have the big Leviathan problem of corruption. With debt servicing eating our revenue up to 70%, it will indeed be impossible to catch up to Singapore. Singapore decided early in the 60s to be a financial hub. It was intentional on saving. It leveraged on manufacturing. It capitalized on foreign direct investment. And it capitalized on skilled workforce and a realistic, intentional agenda for zero tolerance to corruption. So what are the lessons to learn for Kenya, for this government, for those who say that we are going to Singapore? Others are even saying that we will pass by Singapore on our way to Canaan. What do we need to do? Number one, the lessons to learn are very, very easy. We need to build stronger institutions. We have a robust constitution, one of the best in the world. If we only followed and implemented our constitution to the letter, then going to Singapore would be very, very easy. Achieving Singaporean goals would be very, very easy. Another thing we need to do, we need to invest in skills and human capital. We need to tailor our education system to the challenges of the postmodern world. We need to invest in these STEM courses and make sure that our children, our learners, and everyone who's going through the education system is able to look at the challenges that are affecting the world and be able to cope with them and to deal with them. Thirdly, we need to manage and pay our debt. We need to be intentional about this and say that we will not borrow anymore. We will begin a saving culture and we will stop corruption. 50% of our revenues goes into corruption every year. We cannot go to Singapore with such devastating figures. We also need to focus on important strategic areas, that is science and technology, leveraging on postmodern methods of doing business, and we need to stop many of the mistakes that we are doing today. This includes a medical insurance scheme that is not working called SHA, an affordable housing program that does not have a return on investment that was not well thought out. We have two sovereign wealth funds as well that were started recently, copying Singapore, if I'm not wrong. One is an infrastructure fund, another one is a national assets fund. These two sovereign funds, as they are called, need to be self-sufficient. But since we don't have a surplus, it is hard to realize or to know where the funding for these funds will come from. The National Assets Funds, for example, is a fund that is hedged upon parastatals and corporations of government. For very many years, we've known these corporations as loss-making. How can we develop a sovereign fund founded on a base of loss-making? The other sovereign fund is an infrastructure fund that is leveraged on borrowing. How can we borrow to develop our industries? How can we borrow to do manufacturing? How can we borrow to build roads? That indeed is a pipe dream. So, ladies and gentlemen, how can we talk about Singapore and we do not have the wherewithal to get to Singapore? Our national wage bill is unsustainable. The government employs up to 1.5 million people. 60% of the money that we make, that is collected in taxes and forms part of revenue, goes into paying taxes. This is unsustainable. We cannot go to Singapore like this. We do not have resources for development. If 20% of our GDP goes into development, then we cannot be able to develop our country fast enough to reach Singapore. Consider this. If 60% goes into paying salaries, 40% goes into paying debt, then it means we are borrowing 20% to do our development. If indeed we are saying that our debt is unsustainable and we keep on borrowing to fund our development, how is Singapore realistic? It is unrealistic. Our import cover, someone said that it moved from 2 months to 6 months of import cover. Fine, that's an improvement. But if we cannot have an import cover that is 1 year, 2 years in foreign reserves and foreign exchange reserves, then how can we say we are going to Singapore? That remains to be a pipe dream. We still depend on agriculture. We have food security issues, and we depend on rain-fed agriculture. If we cannot be able to feed our people, we hear that people in northeastern in Turkana are already suffering drought and hunger this year. We cannot feed our population, then how is it realistic that we shall go to Singapore? It is impossible. We need to be a business hub. We need to ease doing our business. In Kenya today, for you to be onboarded and to have your business run without any hitches and gaps and problems, it will take you up to 2 weeks to 1 month to get all the many documents that you require, all the many licenses that you require, all the many documents that you need to process. KRA itself has become an agency, or rather an authority, that filters business owners. How can we run a government, or rather, how can we go to Singapore if 500,000 businesses have been flagged by the local revenue authority for not being tax compliant? We are not saying that you don't want to pay tax. No, far from it. But if you make it difficult for Kenyans to do business, then how is it going to be easy for foreign direct investment to come into the country to bring the much desired foreign exchange reserves for us to build an economy that pushes us to Singapore? It is impossible. Nepotism, tribalism, belligerent politics, and corruption. If we do not stop these things, if we do not focus on things that are pushing us ahead into a century that is technological, that is forward-looking, that is advanced, that is Singaporean, then going to Singapore is a pipe dream. Our education system needs to be STEM-based. We should not leverage on taking everybody through school, but we should consider that it is important that our children learn STEM-based courses so that they are able to be the bedrock or the foundation or the backbone of our economy. If we cannot be able to do that, just like President Yoweri Museveni said recently, we end up being in two pygmies. He gave an example, and he said it was a really fun example. He said, in two pygmies, Kenya is the taller of the two. Both of us are short, both of us are pygmies, both of us are dwarfs. We both have dwarf economies. But if we do not do anything, then Singapore becomes a pipe dream, continues to become a pipe dream. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is my assessment of this Singapore story. Is it an illusion? To me, yes. Is it an hallucination? To me, yes. Is it realistic? No. Is it evidence-based? No. We cannot achieve what Singapore has achieved if we continue how we are going. If we go on this way, it is going to be impossible. It is going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. However much you shout from the mountaintops about Singapore, it is going to be an illusion and a pipe dream. Thank you for having me. My name is Robert Onyari. Thank you for coming to the Bounce Back podcast. The white papers are coming out on Thursday. We shall share the links and shall keep the conversations going, because at the end of the day, it is the facts, figures, evidence-based research that will help us determine our development trajectory. We cannot just dream about Singapore, because we cannot make it to Singapore as it is. Thank you very much, and see you next time on Friday.